SC First Solicitor David Pascoe visited Myrtle Beach last night. He spoke to a group of conservative voters downtown. Pascoe explained why he made the move to the Republican Party. The prosecutor is being asked by locals to run for SC Attorney General, but has made no decisions to date. His comments can be heard here.
Do y'all remember Baker Allen, who usually comes with me when I do the PowerPoint presentations? Well, he's going to have to look for another job, because if he can't find a better picture of me than that, I hope you're watching, Baker, because that's awful. Come on, man. I really appreciate that introduction. I use this to refresh my memory on what to talk about, but also if you want to follow what I'm going to discuss tonight. That was a great introduction. There was one other person, even though he's never a political candidate as a Democrat, President Trump gave money to Kamala Harris when she ran for Attorney General.
That's right.
If he was here right now, I'd say, Mr. President, what the hell were you thinking?
And his daughter Ivanka changed also.
That's right, that's right. But I really appreciate it. As you know, and as you can see, we did make some news. I did decide to switch parties and become a Republican. And I'm going to tell you why I did it. Just simply put, I didn't want to wear the label of a party that cared more about victims, or excuse me, that cared more about defendants than it did victims. And I'm all about violent crime and public corruption. That's about all I'm about, right there. And I didn't want to be with that party anymore. I didn't want to be with a party that commuted the sentence, or sentences, of 37 of the most evil murderers in the United States of America, one of which occurred right down the road from here at a bank, where Brandon Council executed 2 women, a teller and a manager. And those families got a phone call 2 days before Christmas, letting them know that their loved one's murderer was having their sentence commuted. Now, why in the heck do I want to be a member of that party? And I cannot be a member of a party that has no room for pro-life public officials like myself. I've actually sat in the room with the National Democratic Party where they looked me in the eye and said, if you run for state office, we will not support you because you're pro-life and pro-capital punishment. And I'm not going to wear the label of a state Democratic Party that rigs elections in South Carolina. That's right. And y'all aren't from Charleston, or nobody here. I don't know if you've even heard about this, but there was a sheriff's race in Charleston where the chairman of the party, Crystal Spain, took an incredibly qualified conservative candidate off the ballot who was going to win the Democratic primary and, by the way, probably become the Democratic sheriff of Charleston. She took him off the ballot to protect her friend, to allow her friend to be unopposed. And ironically enough, guess what happened to her? She lost to the Republican in November. So I didn't want to be a member of that party anymore. And quite frankly, as you can see for the next 3 or 4 pages, it wasn't really a big change for me to switch parties. As you can see, the Democratic Party, the leadership, because let me tell y'all right now, the voters, I've never had any problem with the Democratic voters. If we got the voters that I meet with in Orangeburg County in this room right now, we would agree on 90% of the issues. But the leaders of the party were already calling me last year the, quote, best Republican solicitor in the state. A message I today endorse. They were already calling me a MAGA man on the next page. Those were ads that ran against me when I was a Democrat. They also said, and this is true, David Pascoe is the Trump voters' choice for solicitor. That's true. There were a lot of places, a lot of homes in Orangeburg, Calhoun, and Dorchester that had Trump Pascoe signs in their yards. And even though I had a lot of Trump supporters in a Democratic primary and a lot of African American support, I still won the election in a Democratic Party with over 80% of the vote. This is my favorite slide, the next one. Rhino. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Let's have a little bit of fun with this one. Because I've said this. I don't care if you call me a rhino. I really don't. I don't care if you call me a dino, which is what I've been called for 20 years, a Democrat name only. I don't care if you call me an SOB. don't call me a liberal. If you're a liberal, I respect it. I know not too many liberals out here, so I'm done talking to the camera. I respect it. I really do. I got a lot of friends that are liberal, and I respect them, and I love to debate with them because I learn things, and hopefully they learn things from me. But don't call me a liberal, because I've always been a conservative, and I've always been more conservative than anyone sitting up at the legislature, including the ones that have been tweeting those negative things about me. You know what I loved about some of those tweets? Some of the people have more social media posts about their hair than they do about their legislative accomplishments. Others, this was my favorite one the day after the announcement. There was a tweet between a political consultant who is one of the consultants for the Republican Party caucus up at the House, and Tracy Edge, a man I indicted for perjury and misconduct, calling me a rhino. So go right at it. But you can call me a rhino, don't call me a liberal. And I would only ask you all this, the same thing I'm going to say everywhere I go. And I'm so glad we're in a church, John. We're our pastors. Raise your hand. All right. The greatest man to ever walk the earth, the greatest teacher ever, told us there's one easy way to judge whether someone's a wolf in sheep's clothing or not. Judge them by their fruit. And that's all I'm asking you to do. Judge me by my fruits. I've always been pro-life. I've prosecuted women who've ingested drugs when they were pregnant. I've prosecuted men who have harmed the unborn that were still in the womb. I'm not only pro-death penalty, I was the first prosecutor, first person in the state of South Carolina to call for the firing squad back in 2018. The legislature finally passed a law years later to allow that as a means of execution. I have not only put people on death row, I've put evil murderers, I've sent evil murderers to their executioner. As recently as last month, the last person who got the firing squad, Michael Mahdi, I prosecuted him and got the death penalty on him. So again, judge me by my fruits. I have prosecuted public corruption for over 30 years now, just not the 20 years I've been prosecutor. But whether it was the Speaker of the House, the President pro tem of the Senate, whether it was 2 majority leaders, or the House Judiciary Chairman, or whatever Tracy Edge was, I didn't care. I prosecuted them because they were guilty of corruption and violating our trust in the State House. So judge me by my fruits. That's all I ask of anybody. I thought I wrote this down right after he said it too. Treasurer Loftus said they have no rules. It's kind of similar to what I've been saying. They have rules, but they play by their own rules.
Yeah. Correct. Yep.
And we're going to talk a little bit about the State House and why they're still very important to me in just a minute. The other thing I want you to think about is some things that people don't know about me and what I've done behind the scenes. And that's starting with that next slide. As you all know, because I've been here when I was a Democrat, I've come and spoken here at least 2 times, maybe 3. But I've also been to other Republican Party groups like the Greenville GOP. There was, again, this is information that people don't know, things that I stopped and did before I was a Republican. I wanted to stop liberal candidates from getting on the judiciary. And last year, there was an election for a judgeship, and the candidate was the former Democratic gubernatorial candidate, James Smith. He was running for judge. He was the candidate of Myrtle Smith and Todd Rutherford and all the lawyer legislators to run for judge in South Carolina. Now, before I say anything bad about James Smith, let me say this. He is a good person. He is a patriot. The man joined the United States Army right after 9/11. He's a patriot. He didn't have to do that. He's a lawyer and went in the Army. But I didn't want him to be a judge because I didn't want another liberal, former lawyer legislator to be in the hip pocket of the Rutherfords and the Myrtle Smiths. So I supported the black candidate in the race who was a former prosecutor because he was more conservative and, again, a former prosecutor. You would think the black caucus would support that black candidate, but they did not. They supported the man that their leader, Todd Rutherford, told them to support, the lawyer legislator. James Smith. So I don't want to hear any more about supporting diversity from them, okay? So they supported James Smith. Well, it wasn't just the Democrats, my friends, because I got on the phone call and I started calling Republican after Republican up at the State House. Will you support Justin Williams, my candidate? No, I've already committed to James Smith. One after another. All this, and I'm not going to name them now. I'll wait till they call me a rhino and then I'll call them out. But I'm talking about people that claim to be conservatives, members of the Family Caucus and others. The ones that were supporting Pascoe in his fight to stop James Smith were Freedom Caucus members. All right, I'm going to give him that. So what I decided to do is I made some phone calls and I said, well, we're going to lose in the legislature, especially since Justin Williams, the other candidate, got pushed out of the race by Rutherford and others. I said, James Smith is now running unopposed. There's only one way to stop him, and that's to get the legislature to not vote for him. And they said, well, Pascoe, how are you going to do that? They've already told you they're committed to him. We got to get the Republican electorate, the voters, on board with us. And that's when I came up with, and maybe some of y'all got the email or the mail out, with that flyer right there. And I sent it to the Freedom Caucus. David Pascoe did it. And the Freedom Caucus, and I sent it to John Warren up in Greenville. Never talked to the guy in my life. Didn't know, we wouldn't know each other if we tripped over each other. I called him out of the blue. I said, you got to stop this. And there was, as you some of y'all know, mass mailings, mass communication, and all those Republicans who told me that they were committed to Mr. Smith, guess what they started to do? They do what they always do. They chickened out. And I love it. I'm glad they don't have any principles, because the voters, when y'all ask, what can you do, or what can we do, that's what you do. You call and scare them into doing the right thing. And guess who lost the vote? The Republicans finally turned against them, and they didn't vote for them. Thank you. And that's just judge me by my fruits. I stopped that. The next one I want to talk to you about. Y'all know Senator J.D. Chaplin? Okay, newly elected senator, great guy. We've only talked on the phone a bunch of times, but never met yet, but we talked on the phone a bunch of times. He was running against Senator Gerald Malloy. Y'all remember him? The most in my opinion, most anti-law enforcement senator up there. We could not get bills passed. So another backstory for you, the truth, to judge me by. In October of last year, 2024, right before the elections in November, I was meeting with Republican senators, and several solicitors were in the room. And the two quote-unquote conservative senators, who I'm going to be nice and not name for now, because they haven't said anything bad about me yet either, said that we could not get the gang bill passed, and we could not get judicial reform done, and several other things, because Gerald Malloy was blocking it. So at point blank, this was on like October the 8th, I asked him, I said, so you're telling me if we get Gerald Malloy beat next month, we can get these things passed? And they laughed. And one of them nodded his head like that. I said, will you help me get J.D. Chaplin elected over Gerald Malloy? And you know what both of those conservative Republican senators told me? No. And how much money did the Republican caucus spend on J.D. Chaplin? That much. Zero. Exactly, David. So I told them, well, I'm going to try to do something about it. So before the election, the Democrat is the one who endorsed J.D. Chaplin, who ended up winning by, was it like 100 votes or less? Might have been 70 votes. And he pulled the upset, and we got rid of the most anti-law enforcement senator in the State House. With no help from those conservative Republicans.
AFP spent over $250,000 or $250,000 to help him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Unbelievable. But JD is now our senator. So finally, I'm going to say it one last time, judge me by my fruits. When I did switch parties, one of my best friends was the person who introduced me, and that's Scarlett Wilson. She's a solicitor down in Charleston County. And we've been best friends for over 30 years. And one of the things she said right before she introduced me was, buckle up because the swamp monsters are coming after you. And she was right.
Disgrace. That's right.
And she was right. Because that's the swamp.
We know it.
Lawyer legislators are the swamp. And that's why you're going to see lawyer legislators like the guy who's obsessed about his hair and others come after him. And that's okay. I'm fine with it. Because as long as I'm still either solicitor or if I run for something else in the near future, they're going to continue to hear about how we need to have real judicial reform in South Carolina for me. They're going to continue to hear about how we need to have real ethics reform in South Carolina from me. And how we need to have real bills to curb violent crime in South Carolina. And they're also going to hear how we have got to stop the preferential treatment that they get in our court systems. And I'm going to be doing that, and I'm going to be yelling and screaming about that. In fact, I might even be going to their home districts to stand outside their law offices to talk about it. So, swamp, I'm ready for them. We don't have to worry about that. But I want to thank y'all again. Linda's been trying to get me here, especially after I made the switch. She called me the next day, yelling and screaming into the phone and telling me she wanted to start phone banks. I said, Linda, let's calm down. I haven't decided I'm running for anything else yet. And if I do, it'll be a little while from here. But I didn't even know she was sick because I talked to her today. So,
You don't know.
okay. Well, I love her. And so you'll be getting phone calls from her soon in the near future to support Pascoe.
You okay?
Yeah, but I can answer any questions. I can
yeah.
answer a handful of questions. Yes, sir.
When you switch from one party to another,
Mm-hmm.
do you believe a person's conviction has flipped? Or do you just think there's a majority of that portion that moves you over to the other side?
Yeah,
It's still part of
that's a
it
great question.
that's still sympathetic with some Democratic.
That's a great question. If you come into my home in the last over 30 years, I'm not talking about just after last month when I switched, you're going to see pictures and portraits of Ronald Reagan, Winston Churchill, and one Democrat who will always be an idol of mine, and that's Robert Kennedy, because of how he was as a prosecutor. All right, but those are my and Dwight Eisenhower. Those are my political heroes. Okay, as Winston Churchill said, some people change their principles for their party. Few people with courage change their party because of their principles.
True enough.
And I did it because of the latter. My principles have always been the same. And I'll talk to Democratic groups in Orangeburg and Calhoun and Dorchester the same. I say, look, nothing about David Pascoe has changed at all. I've got the same principles today that I had then. The only difference is, as with Ronald Reagan, the party left me. The party has no room for David Pascoe.
Yeah, they have changed their stance on everything.
But there is one party that is pro-life. There is one party that is pro-capital punishment. There is one party that, look, I don't want to say Democrats are okay with public corruption, because most of the public corruption is by Republicans, okay? All right, because they're who's in power. 30, 40 years ago it was by Democrats, because that's who was in power in South Carolina. But where was I always getting invited to go speak about public corruption and calling out legislators for the last 4 years? It's been Republican groups. I've never had a Democratic Party group say, hey, Pascoe, come talk to us about public corruption. It's always been the Greenville, the Pickens, the Lexington, or the American Voices in Horry. It's always been Republican groups. But that was a great question. I'm glad you asked that. I did it for the latter because the party left my principles. Yes, sir.
Question for you. In the closed primary question, or open or closed primary, has been hanging around Columbia for almost 15 years. Apparently, that idea of closing primaries has passed the House. And now it's up to the Senate, that when they come back to work, that they're going to take that bill up. So if that should happen, and the primaries are closed, does that affect you in any negative way? Because Democrats will basically not be able to vote for you? What do you think about that?
No, because
They probably would like to, but I'm not too sure how that closed primary thing is going to fare with somebody with your ambition.
That's a good question. I don't really count on Democrats voting in a Republican primary and vice versa too much, because remember, they're going to have a primary too.
Yes.
They're going to have gubernatorial and AG candidates too. But this is one thing, and this is where when I disagree, I promise y'all I'm going to let y'all know if I agree or disagree. Like with closed primaries, I'm still on the fence on that one. I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
I want you to think about this. There are people that live in Dorchester County right now that if they're not allowed to vote in the Republican primary, they're disenfranchised. There are Republicans. All right, let's make it, since I think everybody in this room is probably a Republican. There are, maybe not you, I'm not sure about the guy. There are Republicans who live in my home county of Orangeburg County. If they're not allowed to vote in the Democratic primary for solicitor, for sheriff, for county council, they are disenfranchised because there are no Republicans in Orangeburg County. No old Republicans.
I'm in that position, I live in Marion County. And
Yeah.
all our elected
Democrats.
officials are Democrats.
So keep that in mind, y'all, when those that are in this room, which is probably the majority, are in favor of closed primaries. Understand where somebody's coming from if they say, well, I'm not for closed primaries because I need to be able to vote for certain positions. Okay? That's all I'm saying. But that's a good question too. I don't know if it's going to pass or not. Yeah. Yes, sir.
As somebody who's been prosecuted for a very, very long time, can you please try to clarify the concept of due process for U.S. citizens
Oh, wow.
versus due process for illegals? What is the Supreme Court
Dennis.
saying
Yeah.
when it says they're entitled, I guess, to some due process versus the real due process?
That's a great question. It's a shame I ran out of time and I've got to leave. Right? You should have started. That should have been your first question. All right. I am not a constitutional scholar on that issue of due process. I will say this, though. Whatever the United States Supreme Court ultimately says, okay, not a federal district court or a court of appeals on that issue, that will be the law of the land, and even President Trump says we're going to live with it. Just like my hero Dwight Eisenhower, one of my heroes, once said when they wouldn't let blacks go to school in Little Rock, and he said, yeah, you are, because here comes either the 82nd or the 101st Airborne, I can't remember. He sent them and addressed the nation, and he said, we may not agree with the Supreme Court's decision, but it is the law of the land, and we are a nation of laws, not people. So I dodged it a bit because I want to see what the Supreme Court's going to say about it. Let's go back to the Trump deportations for a second, okay? The early ones. I believe everything needs to be done the right way, okay? There is due process rights for everybody. I just don't know what the degrees are for citizens versus non-citizens. Having said that, don't listen to people on MSNBC who are always going to be negative against him. And at the same time, don't listen to everybody on Fox. It's always going to take. Let's wait and see what the Supreme Court says. Because I'll also say this. I have a hard time feeling sorry when the media was showing the pictures of, they were all gang members.
They were.
What in the heck were they doing in our country to begin with? They were all here illegally. You know? The man in Maryland.
Isn't that the point, though? They broke the law to come in.
Great, and that's my other point. Not only that, sir, but many of them were breaking the law when they were here.
Yes.
The man in Maryland, that the U.S. Senator went down there and made the big deal about. And even who's been charged with those things and brought to court. I mean, I don't know where our country is losing its mind in some ways. I hear about this Wisconsin judge. Okay, y'all know about the Wisconsin judge. You know, you watch one channel, oh my God, they charge a judge judicial immunity and blah, 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 and they don't give you all the facts. And I even got I get a little fired up saying, why would they arrest her from... Then all of a sudden I read the facts. I go online and read the warrants. I was like, why is she even a lawyer? She should be disbarred, much less being on the bench for doing what she did. Yes, sir.
Putting aside the Supreme Court,
Yeah.
if you prosecuted two people in the state of South Carolina.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Same crime,
yeah,
same term, everything's the same.
yeah.
One's a U.S. citizen, and one is in the United States illegally.
Okay.
Where would you go for guidance on what the process is for each?
Oh, it's the same. In my prosecution, I believe it's the same, but let me tell you this. Depending on what I prosecuted this person for, the illegal alien, if he got a 10-year sentence, I'll be darned if I'm going to ask ICE to take him when he needs to serve his 10 years for harming that woman or harming that family. Okay? Then take him after he's served his time and done his punishment. All right? Yes, sir.
Common sense.
I think one of the problems is the pastor, of course, we have to spend in church premises.
Yes.
They're legal, by the way. They're a process, so. But one of my concerns are, we create the problem, our government created this problem.
It created it, absolutely,
We
yes.
jails down there, we gave maps, credit cards, so how do we balance it? I mean, we created a monster as a footprint. Is that ever discussed in DC? Does anyone ever take blame for that?
Not 4 years, not a year ago, not 2 years ago. And let's be bipartisan. We didn't see this under Clinton and Obama. You know, it was all the last 4 years. It was all that, and we created this problem. And at least now somebody's trying to fix it. Now, are they going slightly too far? We'll let a Supreme Court make that decision.
Yeah, and we know what we need jerk back.
Absolutely.
We understand that, but it's just sad, that part's never brought up.
And he came in there, what American people want is action. All right? And that's what we're seeing. And let's be bipartisan again. Because you know what I can't stand? Again, your favorite channel. I can tell MSNBC is his favorite. He needs to come in with a scalpel and not a chainsaw. Right? Okay, let me tell y'all something about it. If you come into Washington, D.C. with a scalpel, you're going to get shot in the knee with a gun. Okay? You got to come in blasted, and y'all want a bipartisan example of why I'm sure most people here don't like the Affordable Care Act, or some aspects, or maybe many actually say, yeah, now it's not a bad thing. What did Obama do to get that passed? He didn't go in there with the scalpel, because he saw what happened to Bill Clinton, who tried to go in there with the scalpel. And you don't think Donald Trump isn't smart enough to know that? If we go in there and make small changes, it ain't happening. So anyway, that's Pascoe's constitutional / such to say. I really appreciate y'all. Thank you very much. I want to get back soon.